Picture this. A cold mist rolls across the hills of Shropshire, England. The church bells have stopped ringing. The village stands in silence. A family gathers around the body of someone they loved, but grief is not their only fear. Because death, in those days, was not the end. Death was only the beginning of judgment. And if the soul of the dead carried too much sin, too much guilt, too many secrets never confessed, then according to old belief, that soul might never find peace. It could wander. It could suffer. It could be denied heaven forever. But there was one final, desperate solution. A man would be called. Not a priest. Not a saint. Not someone respected. A man feared by everyone. A man who would stand over the corpse, place bread upon the dead body, take ale into his shaking hands, and consume what others believed had become soaked with every sin, every lie, every hidden crime of the deceased. He would eat their sins. He would take their spiritual burden into himself, so the dead could pass peacefully into eternity. This was the terrifying reality of Richard Munslow of Ratlinghope, believed by many to be Britain's last real sin-eater. Tonight, we walk through the shadows of his grave. We uncover the truth behind one of the darkest forgotten funeral rituals in British history, a ritual so disturbing that even speaking of it made people uncomfortable. Who was Richard Munslow? Was he a hero, sacrificing himself for others? Or was he a cursed outcast, condemned to carry the darkness of an entire village? And if such a ritual truly worked, what happened to the soul of the man who absorbed everyone else's sins? Before we begin, if stories of forgotten rituals, ancient horrors, and the darkest mysteries of history fascinate you, make sure you subscribe to the Grim Tapes, because here, we uncover the truths most people are too afraid to face. Turn off the lights. Stay with me until the very end. Because tonight, we are standing at the grave of the man who ate the dead. The village of Ratlinghope does not look like the kind of place where legends should survive. It is quiet. Small. Hidden among the green hills of Shropshire like a secret the world forgot. The roads are narrow. The air feels older somehow. Even today, visitors describe the place as strangely still, as if time moves differently there. The Church of St. Margaret stands at the heart of the village, ancient and weathered, surrounded by graves that have watched centuries pass in silence. Among them lies one simple headstone. Nothing dramatic. Nothing grand. Just the grave of Richard Munslow, who died in the early 20th century. Yet this ordinary stone carries one of the most unsettling stories in British folklore. People visit not because of who he was in life as a farmer, but because of what they believe he did for the dead. To understand Richard Munslow, we first need to understand fear. Not modern fear. Ancient fear. The fear of dying badly. Today, funerals often focus on remembrance, closure, and celebration of life. But for centuries in Europe, death was surrounded by terror. People feared hell with absolute seriousness. They feared purgatory, where souls might suffer for unimaginable lengths of time. They feared dying with sins left unresolved. And perhaps worst of all, they feared becoming restless dead. In deeply religious communities, confession was not just tradition. It was spiritual survival. A person was expected to confess sins, seek forgiveness, and prepare their soul before death. But death rarely arrives politely. Sometimes people died suddenly. An accident. A fever. A fall from a horse. A childbed tragedy. A winter illness that turned deadly overnight. There was no final confession. No priest at the bedside. No chance to make peace with God. That terrified people. Because if someone died carrying unconfessed sins, what then? Would heaven reject them? Would their spirit remain trapped? Would they haunt the living? These questions were not philosophical debates. They were real fears that shaped daily life. And from that fear, the sin-eater was born. The ritual itself sounds like something from a nightmare. After death, a piece of bread, sometimes called a funeral loaf, would be placed on the chest of the corpse. Sometimes salt was added. Sometimes a wooden bowl of ale or wine was set beside the body. The belief was simple and horrifying. The bread absorbed the sins of the dead. Not symbolically. Literally. The moral corruption, the guilt, the spiritual stain, transferred into the food. Then the sin-eater would arrive. He would often be poor, isolated, desperate, someone already living at the edges of society. He would be paid a few coins. Sometimes only a small meal. Sometimes almost nothing. He would stand before the body and eat the bread, drink the ale. And by doing so, he was believed to take the sins upon himself. The dead person was now spiritually clean. Their soul could move on. But the sin-eater? He remained behind, carrying the darkness. People needed him. But they did not love him. In fact, they often hated him. Because who wants to sit beside a man believed to contain the sins of the dead? Who would invite him into their home? Who would trust him near their children? He became necessary and untouchable. A living scapegoat. A human graveyard of other people's guilt. This is where the tragedy begins. Because sin-eaters were not celebrated. They were shunned. They existed in the shadows. Feared. Mocked. Avoided. Villagers might secretly call for them in the night, then refuse to acknowledge them by daylight. Imagine that existence. Every funeral means another burden. Another soul's darkness. Another layer of spiritual contamination. And everyone around you believes it. Even if you yourself begin to doubt, society will not let you forget. You are no longer simply a man. You are the one who eats death. In Wales, the English borderlands, and isolated rural villages like Ratlinghope, stories of sin-eaters survived longer than most people realize. This was not just medieval superstition buried in ancient history. Some accounts suggest versions of this practice continued into the 19th century, and perhaps even beyond. That is why Richard Munslow matters. Because unlike vague legends from distant centuries, he had a name. A grave. A place. A memory. And people still whisper that he was the last. Richard Munslow was not born into some dark priesthood. He was a local farmer. An ordinary man in an extraordinary story. Accounts describe him as someone whose life changed through personal tragedy. Some say he lost children to illness. 3 of them. A devastating blow in an era when death was common but never easier. Grief changes people. Loss reshapes belief. Some stories suggest that after these tragedies, Richard became connected to the old ritual of sin-eating, not as a profession in the dramatic sense, but as a service to the community. A burden he accepted. Perhaps because he understood suffering. Perhaps because poverty left few choices. Perhaps because someone had to do it, and no one else would. History becomes foggy here. Records are incomplete. Folklore mixes with fact. That uncertainty makes the story even more haunting. Because the truth lives somewhere between documentation and whispered memory. His grave, however, is real. Visitors still stand there today. And they ask the same question. Was this truly the resting place of Britain's last sin-eater? Or had legend transformed an ordinary man into something darker? What matters most is not only whether every detail is provable. It is that the village believed enough to remember. And memory can be more powerful than paperwork. Think about the emotional cruelty of this role. A priest offered salvation and was honored. A doctor treated illness and was respected. But a sin-eater handled spiritual contamination and became polluted by association. He absorbed fear no one else wanted to touch. This is why the ritual reflects something deeply human. We still search for people to carry what we cannot bear. We want someone else to hold the guilt. Someone else to take responsibility. Someone else to stand between us and consequences. The sin eater was that person made literal. He was society's hidden mechanism for emotional survival. Not forgiveness. Transfer. Take my burden. Carry it for me. Let me sleep peacefully while you remain awake. There is something disturbingly familiar in that. Even now. Modern people may not place bread on corpses, but we still create scapegoats. We still exile people who hold uncomfortable truths. We still prefer someone else to absorb collective shame. Perhaps that is why the story of Richard Munslow refuses to die. Because it reveals something ancient inside us. The desperate need to believe guilt can be passed away. But what about the ritual itself? Let us imagine one funeral. A winter evening. Rain against stone windows. Candles burning low. The dead lie in the home, covered carefully, family gathered in grief and fear. No priest has come in time. The person died suddenly. There were arguments unresolved. Secrets unspoken. Regrets left unfinished. The family is terrified. Not only of loss, but of judgment. Someone leaves quietly to fetch him. Hours later, footsteps approach. Not welcomed footsteps. Necessary footsteps. The sin eater enters. No one embraces him. No one offers warmth. He knows his place. The bread is brought. Placed upon the chest. Silence fills the room. Every eye watches. He takes it. This small piece of bread now represents everything people fear to name. Adultery. Cruelty. Greed. Blasphemy. Hatred. Cowardice. Violence. Regret. He eats. Slowly. The ale follows. And with it, the invisible transaction is complete. Some families might feel relief. Others might feel shame for needing such a thing. But no one mistakes this for comfort. It is desperation wearing the mask of ritual. And then he leaves. Back into the cold. Paid just enough to survive. Carrying what others believe they escaped. Tell me. Would you do it? Would you stand there for a few coins and accept a dead stranger's sins into your own soul? Most people say no. But hunger changes morality. Isolation changes dignity. And belief changes everything. If your entire village truly believed this ritual determined eternal salvation, refusing might feel impossible. Especially if someone you loved begged you. Especially if the dead were your own children. That possibility makes Richard Munslow's story even heavier. Was he serving strangers? Or trying to protect his own family from the terror of spiritual uncertainty? There is another darker possibility. What if he did not believe at all? What if he knew it was superstition, but performed it because the village needed theater? Because grief demands action. Sometimes people do not need proof. They need ritual. They need a moment that says, something has been done. The soul is safe now. You may rest. Even if Richard privately doubted the supernatural, he may still have understood the emotional necessity. That would not make him a fraud. It might make him compassionate. Or perhaps lonelier. Because pretending to carry evil can still destroy your life. Social exile does not care whether magic is real. Only whether people believe it is. And they did. Church authorities often disapproved of sin eating. Understandably. It existed outside official doctrine. It was folk religion, not sanctioned theology. Priests viewed it as superstition at best, dangerous heresy at worst. After all, Christianity teaches confession, repentance, and divine forgiveness, not transferring sins through bread to a poor villager. The ritual threatened religious authority. It also revealed something uncomfortable. People trusted old fear more than official teaching. When death entered the room, doctrine sometimes gave way to desperation. That embarrassed institutions. So sin-eating survived in whispers, at the edges of respectability. Never fully acknowledged. Never fully gone. This secrecy adds to the myth around Richard Munslow. Because if a village wanted such rituals, they would not advertise them. They would protect the secret. Public morality and private fear often tell different stories. Even today, people laugh at old superstitions while quietly carrying their own. Lucky objects. Funeral habits. Private rituals before bad news. Humans have never been as rational as we pretend. Now imagine being the child of a sin-eater. What would that feel like? Other children whispering. Parents pulling them away. Your father returns from funerals with silence clinging to him. People pay him but avoid him. They need him, but they do not want to become like him. Shame spreads through families. Isolation becomes inheritance. This is how rituals wound the living. Not only the dead. And yet, perhaps there was pride too. Because if Richard truly believed he was helping souls find peace, then maybe he accepted the cost. Maybe he stood at graves knowing others saw pollution, while he saw mercy. That possibility changes everything. The same man can be viewed as cursed or sacrificial depending on where you stand. Monster or martyr. Outcast or guardian. Perhaps both. When Richard Munslow died, the story should have ended. Another grave. Another village memory. Instead, it became legend. Because people need symbols. And Richard became the symbol of an ending. The last sin-eater. The final keeper of a ritual too strange for the modern world. His grave became more than burial. It became a question. What happens to the one who carries everyone else? Who absolves the absolver? If he truly absorbed decades of sorrow, guilt, and hidden wrongdoing. Who stood over Richard's body? Who ate for him? Or did he go into death alone, carrying an entire village inside his silence? That question haunts people more than the ritual itself. Because it suggests an unbearable loneliness. A man saving others while remaining unsaved. A spiritual servant with no servant of his own. And maybe that is why people still visit. Not for horror. For unfinished compassion. To stand before that stone and wonder whether history was cruel to him. Popular culture loves the dramatic version of sin-eaters. Dark cloaks. Occult ceremonies. Supernatural curses. But reality is often sadder. A poor rural man. Simple bread. Cheap ale. Fear disguised as faith. The true horror is not theatrical evil. It is ordinary desperation. It is communities so frightened of death that they place impossible burdens on one vulnerable person. That is more disturbing than ghosts. Because it is believable. Because humans do it constantly. Different century. Different costume. Same instinct. Take this burden from me. Please. Someone else. Richard Munslow may not have seen himself as history. He may have simply been surviving. Working fields. Burying children. Helping neighbors. Aging quietly. And yet now, more than a century later, strangers speak his name because his life touched a universal terror. What if forgiveness does not come? What if guilt survives death? What would we sacrifice to believe otherwise? That fear belongs to everyone, not just Edwardian villagers. Every person carries private sins, regrets, words we wish we could unsay, people we failed, truths we buried. Imagine if someone offered to remove all of it. One ritual, one witness, one final transaction. Would you accept? And if you would, what does that say about us? Some historians argue Richard was never truly a sin-eater at all. That the legend grew later. That locals romanticized old customs and attached them to a real grave. This is possible. Legends are built from human need, not courtroom evidence. But even if the details changed, the ritual itself existed. The belief existed. The fear existed. And somewhere, many someones stood in that role. Maybe Richard was one of them. Maybe he became their representative in memory. Either way, the truth remains. For generations, people believed sin could be eaten. That belief shaped lives. That matters. Folklore is not false simply because it is unprovable. It tells us what people feared most. And fear is always real. Tonight, if you ever visit Ratlinghope, you can stand there yourself. Mist on the hills. Quiet churchyard. Old stone under your hand. And beneath it, perhaps, the final man who took darkness into himself so others could sleep. No dramatic curse. No cinematic monster. Just silence. And somehow, that feels heavier. Because silence lets your imagination do the rest. Did he regret it? Did he believe? Did villagers thank him in secret? Did children fear him? Did he lie awake wondering whether every funeral brought him closer to damnation? We cannot ask him. Only the grave remains. And graves do not explain themselves. They only wait. Perhaps the strangest part of all this is how quickly society forgets the people it uses. The priest is remembered. The nobleman is remembered. The war hero is remembered. But the one who carried shame? He becomes folklore. Half denied. Half whispered. As if remembering too clearly would force us to admit we needed him. That may be Richard Munslow's true legacy. Not proof of magic. Proof of human fear. Proof that communities will create extraordinary rituals to survive ordinary grief. Proof that loneliness often hides inside service. And proof that sometimes the most haunted places are not castles or forests, but graves of people history thanked too quietly. So now I leave you with this. If a sin-eater stood before you tonight and offered to take every secret regret you have ever carried, every lie, every betrayal, every private guilt, every memory that still wakes you at night, would you let them? Would you hand it over and walk away clean? Or would you refuse, because some burdens are meant to stay with us? And one final question. Who in our modern world has become the new sin-eater? Who carries society's shame so the rest of us can feel innocent? Think carefully before you answer. Because perhaps the ritual never truly disappeared. Perhaps it only changed its clothes. If this story stayed with you, if Richard Munslow's grave now feels a little heavier in your mind, then you are exactly where the Grim Tapes was meant to take you. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe sin-eating was real spiritual protection, or simply fear turned into ritual? Was Richard Munslow a tragic victim, or a silent hero? And most importantly, if you were asked to become a sin-eater for someone you loved, would you do it? If you enjoy exploring forgotten horrors, cursed histories, and the darkest truths buried beneath ordinary places, make sure you subscribe to the Grim Tapes so you never miss the next descent into the unknown. Like this video if it unsettled you. Comment your thoughts below, because the best conversations begin where comfort ends. And until next time. Remember this. Some graves do not hold bodies. Some graves hold questions. And some questions follow you home.